During the 5 months I spent day trading, I wasn't just losing money on bad days. I was losing clarity. I thought my problem was a strategy problem. I needed better entries, better risk management, more discipline. It wasn't a strategy problem. It was an energy and regulation problem. And until I named it, no system in the world was going to fix it. Personal finance books are excellent at covering what to do. The systems, the allocations, the investment vehicles, the debt payoff strategies. The math is clear. What they underaddress is who is doing it. The person reviewing the budget at 11 p.m. after a day of chronic stress, 4 hours of sleep, and a hard conversation with their spouse is not making the same quality decision as the person reviewing the same budget after a good night's sleep, a morning walk, and a clear head. Same numbers, same spreadsheet, different human, radically different outcome. Your physical and mental state is the hidden variable in every financial decision you'll ever make. And it's the one variable almost nobody in the personal finance conversation is talking about. Energy determines action. When you're depleted, you don't make proactive financial decisions. You defer them. The hard conversation about the credit card doesn't happen. The budget review gets pushed. The investment contribution doesn't get automated because you'll get to it later, and later becomes never. Clarity determines quality. When your mind is foggy, you make reactive decisions instead of intentional ones. You spend emotionally. You sell investments when the market drops because fear is louder than the plan. Emotional regulation determines consistency. The single most underrated factor in financial success is not intelligence, not income, not access to information. It's the capacity to stay consistent when circumstances make consistency hard. Your financial decisions are downstream of your physical and mental state, which means optimizing your health is not separate from building financial independence. It is part of it. When I was in that new construction house with the mortgage that exceeded my paycheck, I wasn't just financially trapped. I was cognitively constrained. Survival mode does something specific to the brain. When resources feel genuinely scarce, when the math doesn't work and the hole is getting deeper, the brain narrows its focus to immediate threat management. It becomes harder to think long-term, harder to consider options that require delayed gratification, harder to imagine a different future with any real conviction, because all available cognitive bandwidth is consumed by the present emergency. I wasn't lazy or avoidant. I was operating with a chronically stressed nervous system that had narrowed my field of vision to the next 30 days. This is the part of financial stress that nobody fully accounts for. It doesn't just feel bad. It impairs the very cognitive functions you need most to solve it. The people who most need to think clearly about money are often the ones living under the conditions that make clear thinking hardest. Chronic stress is different from acute stress. Acute stress is the body working as designed. Threat arrives, response activates, threat resolves, body returns to baseline. Chronic stress is that system running on a schedule it was never built to sustain. Cortisol stays elevated. Sleep suffers, immune function suffers, decision-making quality suffers. I couldn't fully see this while I was inside it. It was only after the foreclosure, after we moved into the one-bedroom apartment, after the debt monster stopped growing, and I slept for the first time in months, that I could feel the contrast. My body had been carrying something it couldn't put down. When it finally could, the relief was physical, not just psychological. That's the cost of chronic financial stress that never shows up on the balance sheet. It's paid in sleep, in clarity, in the years of life that high-stress environments quietly consume. Forget money for a second. The real currency of progress, in financial independence, in building anything meaningful, is energy. Not motivation, not inspiration, not willpower. Energy. The raw capacity to show up, think clearly, make decisions, follow through, and maintain enough emotional equilibrium to do it again tomorrow. Money without energy is a number you can't do anything meaningful with. A financial plan without the energy to execute it is just a document. Here's a reframe I found useful. Stop asking, am I healthy or unhealthy? That question is almost unanswerable. Start asking, what percentage of my capacity am I currently operating at? At 40% capacity, daily life looks one way. Procrastination feels unavoidable. Hard tasks feel overwhelming before you begin them. Consistency breaks down under the slightest additional pressure. The habits you're trying to build feel like climbing a hill in wet concrete. At 70% capacity, the same life looks completely different. Follow-through feels natural. Hard decisions happen because you have the bandwidth to make them. The habits that required effort at 40% start to run on their own. 6 signals you're operating below capacity. You wake up tired regardless of how long you slept. You struggle to concentrate when the work demands it. Mood swings become your default response to difficulty. Your energy collapses in the afternoon. You turn to food or screens to manage emotions instead of process them. And social connection, rather than restoring you, drains you. Any 3 of these showing up consistently is the body telling you something needs to change. Health doesn't just affect your ability to manage money. It multiplies every pillar of the life you're building. On financial independence, more energy means more earning capacity, more consistency in executing financial systems, more clarity in financial decisions. Better health reduces healthcare costs, often significantly, and longevity means more time for compounding to work in your favor. On self-awareness, physical clarity supports emotional clarity. When the body is running well, rested, nourished, moved, the signal-to-noise ratio in your inner life improves. You can hear yourself more clearly. The patterns you need to identify become visible when you're not operating through a fog of depletion. On skills mastery, learning is a physiological process. Memory consolidation happens during sleep. Cognitive flexibility, the ability to connect new information to existing frameworks, improves with physical health. The hours you invest in skill development produce better returns when the brain they're going into is operating at higher capacity. On social integration, how you show up in relationships is directly affected by your physical and emotional state. Depletion produces irritability, withdrawal, and the kind of social friction that damages the relationships that matter most. The person you are in a conversation when you're rested and regulated is meaningfully different from the person you are when you're running on 4 hours of sleep. Health is not one pillar among 5 equally important pillars. It is the multiplier that determines how effectively the other 4 operate. I know this concretely from the day trading episode. The strategy didn't fail. The person executing the strategy was running on a nervous system that couldn't sustain it. When I came back 9 months later with covered calls, slower, rules-based, 1 hour a week, no real-time monitoring, everything changed. Not because the strategy was better, because I could finally think straight. Here's the part most personal finance content gets wrong. It treats health as something you'll get to later. Once the budget is fixed, once the debt is paid, once the kids are older, once things calm down. That calm down moment doesn't arrive. In every season you defer, the health investment is a season where everything else you're trying to build is running at reduced capacity. The question isn't whether you can afford to prioritize your health. The question is whether you can afford not to. Your financial decisions are only as good as the state you make them from. And the state you make them from is a choice you're making every day, whether you're aware of it or not. This week, the work is simple. Pick one: sleep, movement, food, stress recovery. Pick the one that's most under-resourced in your life right now and commit to one small, consistent change for the next 7 days. Not a transformation, not a 30-day challenge. A 1% move, daily, repeated. That's the engine that compounds. If this resonated, the full framework, the 4 quadrants of health, the practical baseline habits, the daily practices that actually hold, is in Chapter 6 of The Unrestricted Life. The first chapter is free at the unrestrictedlife.com/chapter if you want to start there. Subscribe if you want one of these every Monday. Each episode pairs with a chapter, and we're walking through all 5 pillars of an unrestricted life: identity, wealth, the ladder, systems, and now health. Next Monday, the 4 quadrants. What optimizing each one actually looks like for someone who isn't a full-time biohacker. I'll see you then.